Welcome to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of Fundraising Day 2011. We're at the New York City Marriott Marquis in Times Square. My guests now are Mindy Duitz, President of Learning Leaders, and Karen Pearl, President and CEO of God's Love We Deliver. Ladies, welcome.
Great to be here.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure to have you. Your fundraising seminar topic is the CEO as fundraising MVP. Now, just a couple of minutes ago, I was talking to three guests about motivating their board to cultivate major gifts, and we'll talk about that board relationship with the CEO. But Karen, what are the key elements of the CEO as fundraising most valuable player?
I would say that the key element is that so many of our donors actually want to meet the CEO, get to know the CEO. And so there's a partnership between the board, the CEO, and the development team to make sure that the CEO knows who they're about to meet, what they're going to talk about, and is ready. Because if the CEO is ready, that's the best leverage that you can get.
Okay, ready and willing.
Ready and willing.
Okay, maybe we'll talk about the unwilling CEO. I'm sorry, Leslie, why don't you, what would you like to Mindy, what would you like to open with around the CEO as most valuable player for fundraising?
Well, I would echo what Karen just said, and I think the key to all of fundraising and all of these things is relationships. That I think that the CEO has to be the person who manages up, the person who manages down, from donors to board, and really forms kind of a whole chain of people having faith in each other. Because people do invest in people as well as organizations. Mm-hmm. And so it's really primarily, I think, who we all are and who we represent in terms of the organizations.
And Mindy, how does the CEO sort of set the culture of fundraising for the rest of the organization? We'll be talking about their individual role with respect directly with donors, but how do they set a culture of fundraising throughout the organization for the others?
I think we all know, but they have to explain that every single member of the staff and every board member absolutely are part of the fundraising team. We're all selling something. We don't like to maybe use that terminology, but we are the spokespeople, we're the practitioners, we're the deliverers, and we have to care and we have to have passion. And I think what distinguishes all of us as nonprofits is the passion for what we do, and that's what makes us able and all be part of fundraising.
But what does the CEO need to do to
CEO
invigorate everybody else?
Well, we need to be the chief cheerleader. We need to be the person who keeps reminding everyone about the value of the work. I mean, what we're really selling is something very important depending on the mission of our organization. So I think the CEO really has to be the person who can articulate it and also inspire people to go out and help sell it.
And Karen, as we had just mentioned a second ago, I said, willingness. There has to be that willingness in order for the CEO to convey the same enthusiasm to the rest of the organization.
Without question, and the CEO has to be willing. And what we talk a lot about at God's Love We Deliver is that each of us has a very special role as an ambassador. And it doesn't matter whether we're being the ambassador directly with clients, the ambassador with our volunteers, the ambassador with our donors. But we work very hard to make sure that all of our staff are prepared to play that role, to know enough about God's love, some key talking points, mm-hmm. to be able to talk at the Sunday dinner with family or at the ball field, sitting with their friends. And I think that does come very much from the leadership. If the leadership of the organization is comfortable fundraising and helps people understand their very special role in that, that filters down into the culture, and people really enjoy it. They really like it. Some of our staff are some of our best fundraisers.
Mm-hmm. Is it possible, Karen, for you to say how much of your time is devoted to fundraising? Some CEOs will say 100%.
Right, it's not 100%.
Everything I do is related to fundraising.
Well, yes, I could say that, but I think the heart of your question is how often am I actually either meeting with the development team, meeting with the board, meeting with donors, mm-hmm. and I would say that's probably half of my time.
Okay. Mindy, do you have advice for boards as they're hiring a CEO around making sure that they get a CEO who's able and willing to do all the things that you described earlier and be that passionate fundraiser?
I mean, the single most important thing that a board of any organization does is hire their CEO.
Right.
And it's got to be a fit, and that sounds kind of trite, but it has to be a fit with them, because in a way they're looking for someone to champion their cause and give them direction. I mean, the CEO is not the chairman of the board, but has to be with the chairman a leader and a partner. So I think the hiring is really about looking for a match, and there's no one definition of that. It's got to be the culture of the organization, the goals of the organization, the level the organization is at. You know, a startup is looking for one kind of person. A very established organization looks for a different level. So it's knowing where you're at. The board needs to know where the organization is at and what's the match for that level.
Yeah, I just want to pursue this a little bit more, just about the hiring of the CEO. Do you like to see people within the organization interviewing potential CEO candidates?
You mean like the staff?
Yeah.
I think it is absolutely the board's decision. I don't think a board should ask the permission of the staff, frankly. I think a smart candidate will ask to meet the key staff to see who they are, to see what they're saying. And so I think it's an important thing to have an interaction and to get a real feel so that you know the CEO themselves has a taste of what the organization is and can even turn to the board and say, well, this is what I see, and perhaps the culture needs to go one way or the other, and are you going to be with me on that?
Karen, earlier you suggested about the, I just forgot what I was going to ask you about, the willingness of the CEO. No, we'll have to skip that because
Can I come back then
yeah,
while
please,
you're thinking?
Go ahead. Yeah.
To the question about hiring the CEO. The one other thing that I would say is that when boards go to hire a CEO, they themselves are in some ways, the organization's key donors. And they can very quickly judge by their own reaction whether they think the person who's sitting in front of them has vision, has passion, can communicate it, because what they're seeing in that interview process is what donors will see. Of course, in an interview, you're not going to know the organization as well, and there will be a learning curve, but boards should put themselves not only in the role of the governance leader, but also in the role of the donor, and say, is this somebody who I see as the face of this organization, who I feel comfortable putting out there on my behalf?
Being the front person.
Exactly.
Yeah. What I was going to ask you is, you had alluded to donors wanting to see the CEO. Mm-hmm. Now, how do you manage overexposure so that the CEO, I don't think, shouldn't be brought in for every donor meeting? How do you decide when it's appropriate and for which donors the meeting for the CEO is right?
Were time not an issue, I would say that your premise that the CEO shouldn't be brought in for every donor is not so.
Right.
Because I do think that every donor is entitled to know the organization and know the leadership. Time sometimes is an issue. So what we do at God's Love is that we do some combination of donor meetings that are one-on-one and other donor meetings that might be a group of people who come in. So we're now in a series of coffee with the CEO. So I can sit and talk with a number of people at the same time. So we try very hard to be as connected, and not just connected to me though, that's the other key, is that they want to meet the CEO, but the CEO doesn't have to be their only relationship with the organization. Mm-hmm. There are board members, there are other donors, there's staff, particularly the development staff, and we share that.
Yeah, and that's going to apply at all levels. Mm-hmm. There should be no donor who only knows one member of the staff.
Right.
Including those people who are receiving your services.
Right.
I mean, don't you want to broaden the knowledge base of the recipients,
right,
who are benefiting?
Right. Well, mostly what we care about, because at God's Love we're dealing with people who are really sick, and so when they need to connect with us, we want them to make that connection. We don't want them to have to hang on the phone for a long time, get a call back. They could be napping by the time the call comes back.
Yeah.
So for us, it's like call anybody. We have a lot of general numbers so that people our clients can get to us really without fuss.
Karen, what's the part of fundraising that you dislike the most?
There isn't really one that I dislike. Okay. I guess the thing that I got to think about that. Nobody's ever asked me that before.
Well, good.
What do I dislike?
Okay. Yeah. Well, Mindy, what do you see in your practice? The part that CEOs perhaps struggle with the most.
I think, like Karen, it's so integral to the job, you don't think about liking it or not liking it. I think sometimes there's a part of me that just takes a deep breath and says, all the energy and all the time and money that goes into raising money, there are moments when you wish you could be using that more to be delivering your service. But it's kind of integral to the work, and
of course,
it is rewarding because it's your opportunity to have people invest in what you're doing.
But is there something that you see CEOs struggle with more than others? Or maybe it's identifying or speaking in large groups or meeting in individual meetings?
I think the nature of being a CEO is that you need to be comfortable with all of those modes. And what might be a struggle is if it's really not you, if it's not your fit. You can be quiet at it, you can be loud at it, you can be exuberant, you can have your own style. But I think for all work, it's got to be a match.
Okay. I'm with Mindy Duitz, President of Learning Leaders, and Karen Pearl, President and CEO of God's Love We Deliver, and you're listening to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of Fundraising Day 2011. Let's talk about the relationship with the board. The board is integral fundraising, integral member of the fundraising team as a whole, and then also as individuals. Karen, how do you manage that relationship with your board as fundraisers?
It's a really key part, I think, of the CEO's job is managing the relationship with the boards, as you say, as individuals and as a group. As
a collective, yeah.
And of finding the right way to engage each board member. Because each
has their own skills, abilities, willingness,
and comfort level.
Comfort.
So some people are like great, getting in there with you, making an ask of somebody. Another one might say, I'm really not comfortable with that, but I will send a letter. And another might say, I'm more willing to have people come to events with me or to buy a table or do other things. Some people are fantastic spokespeople and they don't really want to do fundraising. So I think a real art is getting the best of each of your board members, and as a collective, getting the skill set that you need to really advance the organization in fundraising, but in lots of different areas.
And how do you assess what each board member's strengths and weaknesses are? Is there some kind of formal assessment, or is it really just you getting to know them and understanding that way?
That process starts way back in the recruitment process for new board members in terms of why are they being recommended, what is their formal resume, and then what is their informal resume. Because a lot of people have skills that, like they might be a coach, and if somebody's a coach on the side, that speaks to how they might work in a group on your board. So it's getting to know them through the recruitment process, and then ultimately spending some time with board members once they're on the board to talk about that and to nurture them. We have somebody on our board right now who promised us he would never do an ounce of fundraising. And he's now like out there getting his friends involved, calling people, asking. That takes time. And so where they start may not be where they end up after a year or two of service.
Mindy, in your practice, do you use much formal assessment of board members, maybe assessing each other or certainly at least themselves?
I've had experiences with both. I think it's actually very healthy to do formal assessment, but it depends, again, at the point the board is at and where the organization is at. I said in the beginning of this conversation that all this is about relationships and managing them. Of course. And I think boards need to self-assess and need to say, how are we doing and how's our mix and what is it we need more of? And that's sometimes good to do formally. Maybe they need a workshop. Maybe there are those people who want to practice. Most importantly, it's a one-on-one relationship to building their strengths. And the formality, I think, just gets the conversation started. Okay.
What about the training of board members for fundraising? That I imagine that probably starts in the recruitment process also, setting expectations. But let's talk generally about the
I think that it
training?
depends whether it's a new board member who's never been ever a board member or a very experienced one. You know, some people come to you with a lot already. We often have formal training sessions. If there's a campaign, we're going to meet, we're going to go over the goals and even role playing. So it can be very formal and specific, or coming to conferences like this. Conferences are a great way to bring a board member into a professional setting, to realize they're connected to a much broader world. It's not just their organization, that there's resources, that it also inspires them. They feel very proud.
Yeah, Karen, it looked like you were nodding and suggesting you wanted to say something around setting the board members' expectations at the recruitment stage around fundraising.
I think it's very important to do that. Very important before you, as you're offering them a board position, to make sure they understand that, and then to keep working and doing training. And for every time you ask a board member to help is another opportunity to advance what they know and their comfort level. So something is simple. One of the things, we're about to have a big fundraising event next Saturday night, and our board members will have the names of 2 people we really want them to connect with, and a little cheat sheet that'll fit like in their shirt pocket that's has the 2 or 3 things we really want them to talk about with that person. So they feel like when they come over and they say, "Hi, Tony, I hope you're having a good time tonight," that if the person's not really chatty, they know what to follow up with. And that gives them a great comfort level. And again, they become fantastic ambassadors, because in a party, we're not asking them to fundraise per se, we're asking them to friend raise.
That's a great example, I think, of giving a board member a very manageable goal. At this large event, we'd like you to meet these 2 people.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And then we set up staff to make sure that the staff is on the lookout for those 2 people and that 1 board member, to make sure that they find each other.
Right. Yeah.
And that way they can feel successful. Because it's one thing to get a gift, get a grant, but there's so many steps along the way, and giving very specific direction and, you know, something like a real job at this event, it just makes people feel really good.
Yeah. Mindy, how do you like to see CEOs prepare for a meeting with a donor? It doesn't necessarily have to be a solicitation, could be, but how do you like to see them prepare for a meeting with a major donor?
Well, I always like to be fully briefed by my development staff, or it might be a board member who knows this donor as well. I like to know everything. I like to know their professional background, other organizations they're involved with, kind of a nice profile research. And then I like to talk to a couple of people in the organization and think, well, given this person's background, you know, what are the parts of our organization, our work, that we think are the strongest, and just really go in briefed, and at the same time be wide open to going in another direction, because you really don't know when people start talking what you're going to. I've gone in thinking one and ended up discussing, you know, climbing mountains in Nepal, because that's something we found together, and that brought us into the conversation.
Yeah, that's great. When I was as a planned giving director at a couple of colleges, I would look for things in the office that would make a connection, whether it was, well, I'm not too much of a sports guy, but I had to sort of hold my own in sports because I don't really know much about it, but lots of guys do. So if I see a sailboat, you know, I need to know where is it, looking for that connection that you're talking about, Mindy. Yeah. Because, as you said several minutes ago, people give to people, right? I mean, they love your work, but that connection with the person, critical. Karen, how do you like to prepare for your meetings? Let's say it is a solicit. My voice broke again, because in the last interview session we were talking about 16 to 40-year-olds. So I think I'm back to puberty. My voice just cracked. Sorry. How do you like to prepare? Let's say it is a solicitation. You're asking from someone for a mid-6-figure gift. How do you like to prepare for that meeting?
Well, I would add Mindy's whole list.
Okay.
I would add to that their giving history with us. Potentially their giving history with others, so that we have a sense of whether we're asking them for the biggest gift they've ever given or not the biggest gift they've ever given, because that depends on their willingness, their capability, and their potential eagerness. And then now in my career, I can sort of go with that. Earlier on in my career, I liked to practice. I actually liked to sit down and practice asking, because until you, my experience.
Will you do a role play with
Right.
a staff member?
Yeah, with a development person
Okay.
or the board member or the two of us. If it's a board member and myself for a six-figure gift, we might go with two people. We need to sit down so we know who's going to do it. Because usually, sometimes you run the risk. It's a great meeting. You're back and forth, and then like you're looking at each other, like who's going to ask. So everybody's role needs to be very clearly defined, and I think you need to practice saying the words. And I'm hoping that you will consider a gift of whatever number you've planned on to the organization. And until you can actually get those words out of your mouth, and the best way to do that is practice it so often that it's a sentence like anything else.
And they become second nature. Yeah. That's the CEO as Fundraising MVP. I've been with Mindy Duitz, President of Learning Leaders, and Karen Pearl, President and CEO of God's Love We Deliver. Ladies, thank you very much for joining me.
Been a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thanks.
This is Tony Martignetti, Nonprofit Radio coverage of Fundraising Day 2011.